So this is from Karen Mallory. Karen, thanks for sending in a question. So my prayer partner and I just finished Needless Casualties Award by John Paul Jackson. How do I know if I'm in the second heavens? I'm a seer, and if I see something, is it in the first heaven, the second heaven, or what? I don't want to be overstepping my boundaries. All right. So first, for those of you that want some clarity, first heaven, second heaven, what's that talking about? In Corinthians, Paul talks about spiritual experiences, and he talks about a man, and most scholars believe he's talking about himself, but he talks about this man that went into the third heaven, and he saw things that he's not allowed to talk about. Now, you would assume that if there's a third heaven, there's a first and a second heaven. That would seem to make sense. And so out of that understanding, if there's three heavens, and Bible talks about heavens, and then it talks about the heavens of the heavens, that there is more than one heaven. And so many people believe the first heaven is the realm that we are in, which would be the physical realm, and it's the realm that we're interacting in. The second heaven is the realm that was intended to be the bridge between the third heaven, where the throne of God is, what we would often think of as the heavenly realm, where we see into heaven in John chapter 4, or Revelation chapter 4, where John hears a voice that, come up here, and there's a door open into heavens. That would be the third heaven. So the second heaven was intended to be a bridge, but when Satan and his demons were cast out of heaven, they're still spiritual beings. They begin to occupy the second heaven. And so second heaven is often talked about as the place that is most often occupied by the enemy. Now, the thing is, it was not created by the enemy. It was not created for the enemy. It's being occupied by the enemy. And so there are aspects of the second heaven that are not evil. The second heaven does not equate to what we think of as hell, or what the Bible talks about as hell. That's another place, and that's another conversation at another time. But this place of the second heavens, in Needless Casualties Award, John Paul talks about the level of authority that we've been given. In one of the Psalms, it says that the earth has been given to the sons of man, but the heavens belongs to the Lord. So we've been given authority in the earth realm, or in the first heaven, but we've not been given the authority to go into those other realms. We need invitation to go into those other realms, which is why John had to wait for an open door and a voice to say, come up here. He couldn't just go to heaven because he wanted to go to heaven. There had to be an invitation. And so when we go into the realm of the demonic in the second heaven, we need to have an invitation. We have to have the authority to go into that place. How do you know if you're looking into the second heaven? Because it has been occupied by the enemy, it's going to be very similar to recognizing the difference between a God dream and a dark dream. When you are in the third heaven and you're in that heavenly realm, there is a level of light that almost can't be described. It's like the colors are more vibrant, everything's more alive. The light is almost alive in and of itself. But in the second heaven, it's not like that. It's dim. It almost feels more natural to us because we still see with our physical eyes that have been corrupted by the fall. We don't see as clearly the glories of creation the way it was intended. So we often see the corruption. And the corruption, one of the clearest realms of corruption, is the lack of light, the lack of color that has come into the world. So the second heaven is often just going to be dim. There'll probably be color there, but it's not going to be the vibrant, bright, glorious colors. And there will often be a sense of intimidation. Because if you're in the realm of the enemy, spiritual beings carry atmosphere. So every one of us as spiritual beings, we have an atmosphere that we carry. And to the extent that we steward that atmosphere, it can affect others around us. Every spiritual being actually emanates an atmosphere. And so there's an atmosphere in the demonic realm, and you will feel that. Now, if you have agreement with that atmosphere, it will feel normal. So I'll use an example. If you're around the atmosphere of a spirit of murder and you hate someone, you have hate in your heart towards someone, you probably won't be able to discern the atmosphere because it'll feel normal to you because you have agreement with murder. Because Jesus says that if you hate in your heart, you've already committed murder. So if you have agreement with it, it's going to feel normal to you. It's going to feel familiar to you. But if you don't have agreement with it, it's going to be obvious that it's there. So as you develop your own agreement with the ways of the Lord and you work through coming out of agreement with the ways of the enemy, you'll be able to recognize more and more the spiritual atmosphere that you're in. So when you're in the second heaven, you're generally not going to be encountering the Lord, but it would not be unusual to encounter creatures that are perceived to be angels of light, because the enemy will disguise himself as a messenger of light. He'll actually disguise himself, clothe himself in as much light as he can to pretend to not be that realm. So the more you know the real, the easier it is going to be to discern the negative. So if you want to learn how to distinguish the second heaven or the realm of the demonic, the worst thing that you can do is study the demonic, because it won't help you very much. The best thing you can do is study God, because the more you know about him and the more you know about his ways and his way of doing things and his personality, it's going to be so easy to recognize the counterfeit. And we talk about this and we're talking about counterfeit spiritual experiences, but the same is true when we're dealing with something that's pretending to be good, but it's not. When you know the real, you'll recognize the counterfeit. I used to work at a bank for a while, and I started out as a teller. When I was a teller, they were teaching us how to recognize counterfeit bills. They never once showed us a counterfeit bill. They didn't tell us the common mistakes that counterfeiter made. All they did is they showed us what the real was. They showed us all the little details. And this was a few renditions of the US dollar when I was going through this training before where we're at right now. But at the time, there were 3 different colors of threads that were in the paper, that were built into the paper that you could actually move. They weren't printed on. They were actually threads, and so that you could actually pull them off. There was a little clear plastic strip that would have the denomination of whatever bill it was that was in a particular place. And when you held it up to the light, you could see it and you could read what was on that strip that you couldn't see normally. But once it was held up to the light, it was there. There was a watermark that matched the face of whatever president was on that bill. And each bill has a different president that was on it. Some of them off-centered, some of them not off-centered, some facing forward, some facing to the side. What letter are actual mints that would be producing bills? There's so many, all these details. We learned all the details. One time I was counting through, somebody had given me $1,000 worth of $10 bills. That's a lot. And at the time, we didn't trust the machines that you count. We use to count bills now. We actually counted by hand because the machines were inaccurate at that time. They hadn't gotten to the point where they are now. So we counted every time. We would count that by hand. So I'm counting through this stack of bills. And if you've ever seen a teller that counts all the time, how quickly they can go through a stack of bills. It's not even a second that you're looking at any one bill. And I get through and I stop about halfway through. I have to back up 2 or 3 bills because it took that long for it to register in my brain, but something didn't look right. And I found a counterfeit bill. Never seen a counterfeit bill before in my life, but it just didn't look right because I knew what the real was. So if you pursue knowledge of the real and you go after the presence of God, if you end up in the second heaven, you'll know. It just won't feel right. It just won't feel that sense of familiarity, that sense of love and companionship that you get from the presence of God. And whatever experience that you're having, as you've developed your relationship with the Lord, you can always go back to him and just ask, God, is this you? Where are you at? What do you want me to do? How do you want me to respond? We too often in our spiritual experiences rely on our minds and our understanding rather than rely on the voice of God. And it's the voice of God that gets us there. We can trust the voice of God while we're there. So constantly stay in communion with the Lord. And when you get someplace where it's not someplace that you're supposed to be, or it's not where you think it is, he will make it clear to you if you keep your reliance on him. So don't trust too much in your understanding, but there are some things to grow in to recognize. So hopefully that helps you some. Thanks so much for sending in that question.